Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in to the GazWeatherVids.com Spring 2019 forecast. So we've been doing updates for the spring of 2019 since the beginning of February, very late with the spring updates of course this year, but we've been doing updates for the spring of 2019 since the end of January, beginning of February. We've come to the GazWeatherVids.com Spring 2019 forecast, so we're going to bring together our methodology, we're going to bring together our spring analogs updates and combine it with the long-range seasonal models, and we're going to release the GazWeatherVids.com Spring 2019 forecast. So you'll see what we're forecasting with low confidence for the spring of 2019 very shortly. Just to say that coming up later on today, we'll have GazWeatherVids Sunday Roundup, so I'll be with you after lunch. And also, I haven't spoken about this in videos up to now, we're also going to have a little sneak peek for the summer of 2019, because that's where the long-range bandwagon will be rolling onto once we get this forecast out for you. I just say it's going to be quite a long video, as always, with long-range stuff, so if you can't watch it all in one go, don't worry, this video will be placed on the spring updates and forecast page, or as it will be now, spring forecast page later on this evening with a written summary, so you can watch the video on demand whenever you want, and you can come back and have a read of that written summary as well. I've got to say a big thanks to James Ackrill, our analogs guru, for not only getting all of the analogs together through this season of updates, but also bringing together the analogs for the spring forecast. So big thank you to James for doing that. Also big thank you to Terry Scully and to Richard Trott. We're a real team at GazWeatherVids. It's a group effort to bring this spring 2019 forecast together for you. So we very much collaborate and work in a collaborative way, and we bring these long-range forecasts together as a group effort. Big thanks to James, to Richard, and to Terry. And I think without anything else to talk about, I'd better get on with the spring 2019 forecast. So we're going to start off by just bringing together our key analogs here. So I'm going to talk you through this table that James has created for us. This shows the leading analogs, the leading analog years from the GazWeatherVids forecast methodology. So the key years that we've got with our methodology is 1869, it's 1896, it's 1901, 1913, 1914, 1924, 1929, 1934, 1953, 1961, 1964, 1973, 1995, and 1997. Now, of course, there are many other years that we've included within our analogs updates that might just have one match or two matches, but this is looking at the best years, the years that have the most matches in terms of the GazWeatherVids forecast methodology to 2019. So, for example, let's start at the very top. We've got the spring of 1869. Just here, it has 3 matches to 2019. It has a very mild February with a CET of 6.5 degrees or greater. It has a very mild December with a CET of 6.6, 7.2. And it matches in terms of the ENSO as well. It's a weak El Nino to ENSO neutral spring. And again, we've got another year just here, 1924 has had 3 matches through the GazWeatherVids forecast methodology. It's the top 30 driest February since 1850. The spring of 1924 is around solar minimum, and it also matches from an ENSO perspective, going from weak El Nino to ENSO neutral. So those are the years that are matching kind of like 3 different elements to this year, to 2019. But there are years that have better matches. So, for example, 1901 just here has 4 matches to 2019. It matches up with January England and Wales rainfall. It matches up with the very mild December. It matches up with solar minimum, and it also matches up with ENSO. Another year that has 4 matches is 1997. Very a more modern, if you like, year as well. So maybe perhaps a little bit more relevant than, say, 1901. But this one has 4 matches. It's very mild, has very mild December, very mild February, I should say, in 1997. It also matches up being a top 20 driest January since 1900. It matches up as being very close to solar minimum, and it also matches up with a developing westerly QBO. So that's a pretty decent match. Certainly a little bit better, perhaps, than, say, 1901 or 1869. It's perhaps a little bit better in terms of the match to 2019 than those years. The best match, though, the year that has occurred most regularly in our spring 2019 analogues updates. And do bear in mind, we haven't done as many updates for this season as we would normally do. So that's the caveat. It's the reason why the forecast is going to be delivered with pretty low confidence, because we just haven't looked at a great deal of data this season due to the fact that we started the updates so late. But the best match is the year of 1914, because it has 6 matches. It matches up with the February Central England temperature. It matches up with precipitation, both in terms of England and Wales total precipitation and also being a top 20 January since 1900. It matches up with the January Central England temperature. It matches up being around solar minimum, and also matches up in terms of ENSO being a weak El Nino to ENSO neutral spring. So 1914 comes out as the best analogue year for 2019 in terms of the GavsWeathers.com spring forecast methodology. Now let's try bringing these together. So we're going to start off with the top set, if you like. So this is anything that's got 3 or more matches. So this is including all of these key years, really. It's including everything from 1869 at the top through to 1997 at the bottom. All years will be included in this first batch of analogues, and then we'll narrow things down a little bit more. So in terms of all of these years, this is how the marches are looking, and it's an anticyclonic signal really for the marches, with above average heights over and to the east of the country. We've got below average heights out in the Atlantic, and we will be favouring bringing up quite mild, or even maybe even fairly warmish southerly to southeasterly winds. Dry and mild is favoured, therefore, in March. Now, April is interesting because in April, we do get a blocking signal appearing around Greenland. So we do favour raising heights towards Greenland, but we're also raising heights down across Spain and France. So we've got the jet stream almost coming right through the country. This is a more unsettled signal, I think, for April. But although there is fairly strong northern blocking, generally this would be a mild signal for April still. We would still be favouring bringing the winds in from the west or the southwest, and with the high pressure down to our south, there would be a lot of mild weather, but also more unsettled, I think, in April. And then May, when we combine all of these years within the top 3 or more matches, so the GavsWeathers.com spring 2019 forecast methodology. May's a difficult month. It's quite a weak signal. There's below average heights to our east, but we still have this ridge that's down across Spain. So I think overall the jet stream is still pushed northwards. I think overall we're probably still relatively settled, and we're probably still bringing in relatively mild air from the south and from the southwest too. The overall spring analogue for these years looks like this. So below average heights, low pressure out in the middle of the Atlantic and also across the north of Scandinavia. Above average heights to our northwest. It's not too bad a signal at all, I don't think. So we're not bringing in the Atlantic. We're not unleashing the Atlantic in what you would expect in a very unsettled spring. I think overall there's a reasonable amount of dry and quite mild weather going on in this spring. Bear in mind, April is seen to be slightly more unsettled, but even then, temperature anomalies are probably okay in April. Now, this is how the temperature and precipitation anomalies are looking with these key analogue years. So in March, the temperature anomaly is very weak, just very close to average, possibly no signal at all. But I would have thought March would probably be favoured to be quite mild, really. A fairly mild month would be expected, I would have thought, with high pressure quite close to the country. April also showing no signal. I would have thought April again is fairly likely to be quite a mild month, but it is a more unsettled month as well in April. May, again, very weak signals with the temperature anomalies during May. And the springs overall, again, quite weak signals with these key analogue years. Precipitation-wise, we do see a strong signal for March to be drier than average with these key analogue years. So again, that's because we're shifting the winds into a more southeasterly type direction with that high pressure centered away to our east. I think a warm or a mild and dry month would be favored for March. April's a little bit more unsettled, to be expected, because we lose the high pressure and we kind of like get low pressure close to the country in April. So it goes a little bit more unsettled in April. It's not a washout of the month really, but certainly more unsettled in April compared to March. May, no particular signal for precipitation in May, just very, very weak signals there. And the overall springs themselves for precipitation, again, not much help really with this. So again, very, very close to average or no particular signal. Now let's try and narrow this down a little bit more. So let's exclude some of those years that aren't the best matches. So now we're narrowing things down to the years that have got 4 or more matches, taking out the ones that only have 3 matches. So for that, we narrow things down quite a lot, and we come away with 4 key analogue years. Then we come away with 1901, we come away with 1914, which we know is the best match. It has 6 matches to 2019. We come away with 1961, and we come away with 1997, which again is a more recent year as well. So that's an important analogue because it is a little bit more reflective of the modern UK climate, I think, compared to, say, 1914 or 1901, for example. This is how the Marches are looking when we narrow things down to 4 or more matches. So in March, we tend to get below average heights to our north and northeast. There's also below average heights in the Atlantic. Notice we lose that ridge that we have when we've got 3 or more matches. The ridge looks like it's more towards the southeast of Europe. So overall, I think this is a more unsettled signal actually for March. I think we lose the chance of a warmer, drier month. We possibly turn things cooler and more unsettled with these Marches when we're narrowing things down to 4 or more matches. But conversely, in April, we actually turn more settled with these 4 key analogue years. So in April, we raise the heights over and to the south of the UK with the below average heights up to the north. That sends the jet stream northwards, and I think April could well be favoured to be a warmer and drier month with those 4 key matches, and we keep that anticyclonic signal going into May as well. So very different when we narrow things down compared to when we're looking at anything, any spring, kind of like 3 matches or more. When we're narrowing this down to 4 matches or more, looks rather different, and we get this big area of above average heights very close to us. It's actually centred a little bit out to the west, so there could be some cool air coming around from the northeast, perhaps. Maybe not a particularly warm signal, but certainly it's a dry signal, and it's an anticyclonic signal. And of course, the position of that ridge could change. It might not necessarily be in exactly that position if the ridge is more around there, for example, and that's going to be a warmer signal. So overall, I think we start off perhaps slightly more unsettled and cooler for March, but then April and May potentially turning, both months turning warmer and drier. This is how the springs overall are looking when we're narrowing things down to 4 or more matches. It's a decent signal for spring. It suggests quite a nice spring with above average heights over the UK and much of Western Europe. The jet stream is pushed up there, so it's a mild, dry signal for these springs when we're combining 1901, 1914, 1961 and 1997. Not too bad a signal at all in terms of the 500 millibar height anomalies. Precipitation, temperature-wise, I should say, for March. So, again, very close to average. Not much of a signal. I think potentially it's a little bit of a cooler signal though for March. But for April, actually, it's a warmer signal. So you'll notice most of the UK and Western Europe are having, our forecasts have above average temperatures during the course of April. Quite a nice month coming up there. And then May, so again, very weak signals. It does go a little bit cooler than average across central parts of Europe. But out to west of the UK, it's actually a little bit milder than average. So after that warm spell that we get in April, it maybe cools down a bit as we go through to May. But nevertheless, this isn't too bad at all from a temperature perspective. And overall for the springs themselves, for these four key analogue years, we find that the temperature anomaly is coming out quite close to average precipitation wise. So March looks like this. Still favours a relatively dry month actually. I'm a little bit surprised about that. I thought it would be more unsettled, but overall still relatively dry signal for March. For April, it's perhaps a little bit more unsettled than I would have expected. So I would have expected drier conditions across most parts of the UK and Northern Europe in the Aprils, but it's looking average to maybe, to our south and east anyway, a little bit wetter than average. May, no particular signal. Throughout all of this, May is the one month that's posing quite a lot of uncertainty. Very weak signals for May. And then in terms of the springs overall, it is a rather dry signal actually, with precipitation anomalies coming out rather drier than average. Finally, just going to show you that key analogue year. The top year is 1914. So this is how March 1914 came out. It was a very, very unsettled month indeed, with a deep area below average heights, low pressure over top of the country, and we bring in this strong westerly wind. So it's a wet month. It's Atlantic driven, so it's not cold, but it is a very unsettled and very wet month in March. April, though, flips to a much more anticyclonic month with above average heights centred across most parts of Europe. The jet stream is pushed northwards, so we send the jet stream off up there, and we're on the warm side of the jet, therefore we're close to a ridge. It's a warmer and drier month in April. And then May looks like that. So again, we've got the below average heights up to the north, the above average heights are to our west. That's a westerly month, probably not overly warm, but generally I would have thought still reasonably dry. But spring overall looks like that in terms of the 500 millibar high anomaly. We've seen this a lot through the spring updates. It is an unsettled spring overall, but a lot of that is down to what's happening in March. And then we get much more of an anticyclonic signal in April and in May. Temperature anomalies in March are close to average, hints at being a little bit cooler than average to the west of us in March 1914. April goes mild, a warmer than average month. Above average temperatures occurred in April of 1914, and then we go through to May, and it's close to average, possibly hinting at being a little bit on the cooler side in May, but to close to average. The overall temperature anomaly for the spring of 1914 is close to average. The precipitation anomaly as we go through into March of 1914 looks like that. So it's an unsettled month, average to above average precipitation favoured, close to the UK. You would possibly expect to be a little bit wetter than that, if anything. So, but it does hint at being on the wetter than average side, most definitely. Then it hints that April possibly goes on the drier than average side to some degree, and then just very average looking precipitation anomalies for May. The spring overall of 1914 from a precipitation point of view is average to slightly above average, but again that is primarily down to what's happening in March of 1914. Right, so that's our analogues, and we've got to bring it all together now. And the first thing to say, let's just move the camera up the screen a little bit. There we go. So the first thing to say is that I'm expecting another milder than average season. I think temperature anomalies are very likely to come out above average for this spring, based on the GaussWeatherViz.com spring 2019 forecast methodology. There's no real signal anywhere for a particularly cold spring. So, I mean, you can't discount anything, but certainly from our methodology, there's no signal for a really cold spring within this analogues package. And we're in a very warm period anyway at the moment. So I think we have to favour above average temperatures, maybe very significantly so. But I'm going to say we come out around a degree above the 81 to 2010 average. So, yes, it is above average. I don't anticipate we'll have an exceptionally warm season, but again, we didn't anticipate that for winter or for last summer either, so maybe it will come out very substantially above average, but I'll say around a degree above average, and if it comes out any more, don't be overly surprised. But a milder than average season expected. Precipitation-wise, it's really difficult, this, actually, because there's evidence both for quite an unsettled spring here, but maybe something rather anticyclonic. We know we're going to start off relatively unsettled for March, but my suspicion is that this may not actually be indicative of the spring as a whole. So I'm going to say we actually could have a rather drier season again, to be honest, albeit with a more unsettled March. But I think as we progress through March, we will probably find heights rising later in the month, and that could take us into a rather drier spell again as we go through April, possibly going into May as well. May is the one sort of question about all of this. I think March is likely to be a rather cooler and more unsettled month. April possibly favouring something a little bit warmer and drier. And then real question marks about May. That's quite a puzzle, what's happening in May. But I think there is a chance anyway that we could have a reasonably dry and warm period after an unsettled start through this spring. So, do we make up the rainfall deficit? Potentially not really, although, again, I think we do have a very unsettled start to this spring over the next couple of weeks, but I'm not sure that's going to be indicative of the spring overall. And I reckon there could be, however, some colder snaps through the course of March. I don't totally write off the chance of some snow during the course of March, but overall this is not looking like a particularly cold season, I have to say. Generally mild temperatures, generally above average temperatures, and precipitation, if anything, I'd go more towards the drier side of things, although I think we do start off quite unsettled. That's the best I can do for you for the spring 2019 forecast. It's given with very low confidence due to the fact that we started this season of updates so late. There are a lot of things that we've had to leave out, we've not been able to look at with this season of updates, rather disappointingly, but we started them so late we didn't have time to get all of the data in. So that's the best I can do. Above average temperatures by around a degree. Don't rule out an exceptionally mild season again, but I'm going to say around a degree above average. And although we started off relatively unsettled, probably generally overall a little bit on the drier side again through this season. And there could be at least one spring month, maybe favouring April, that could be particularly warm and dry, but we shall have to see about that. Right, and that is the GaussWeatherViz.com Spring 2019 forecast. So this video will be placed on the spring forecast page with a written summary later on today. You'll be able to come back, you can watch it on demand and read that written summary from this evening. As ever, we will evaluate the forecast when we get to the end of the season, so you'll be able to see how you did. There'll be no cherry picking with this. If we're completely wrong, it turns out to be a very cold spring, for example, or a very wet spring, we will fess up and we'll tell you that we got it wrong when we come to evaluate the forecast at the end of the season. We're rolling on now with summer updates, so there'll be a little sneak peek for summer 2019 updates coming up for you this afternoon, and from next Sunday, the summer 2019 updates will commence. We've got GaussWeatherViz Study Roundup coming up this afternoon as well, so keep checking back to all of the updates at 24 minutes. That's your spring 2019 forecast, and that's all for now. Thanks for watching.